when we dive into the receivers, I think we have to start with Carnell Tate. I think that's always where you've got to go when we're having this
Yep.
conversation, and there's multiple reasons for that. As you can see from the rankings here, reason number one is Carnell Tate is a really, really talented player. Not that the rankings determine that, but I think that in this instance, they're an indication of that. Although ESPN is shocker is a little bit of an outlier there. Sometimes it works out well for Notre Dame, sometimes not so much for some of Notre Dame's targets. But 5-star player from 3 of the 4 services. I believe I grade him out as a 5-star. I don't know how you grade him out specifically. We'll get into more of that as we get into the show. But what we both agree on is this is a big-time player from Notre Dame's backyard. And he brings, I think, the thing that we discussed sort of in the show today, this morning show during the Q&A session is this is a kid that we believe, Ryan, can play everywhere. He has skills that fit the boundary, W. He has skills that fit the Z. He has skills that fit the X. And I think that's the really interesting thing about Carnell is it's like, well, what position is Carnell going to play? Don't care. Receiver. You know what I mean? Like, which one? Pick one. And I think that's the thing that's really intriguing. So backyard, elite talent, versatile. He checks all the boxes, and he gives some size to the table. This is a 6'2", 195-pound kid that is going to be 205, 210 when it's all said and done. A body type that reminds me a lot of Kevin Austin, but I think in a more diverse skill set as far as a wide receiver, Ryan.
Yeah, no, and we'll get into what we believe makes Carnell a special football player, but I agree, Brian, kind of like the big overlying theme of what you were talking about was I think that he can play all over, and I think that he has to play all over because the game is just becoming so much more of creating mismatches, right? If you put a guy in the same spot every single play, it's pretty darn easy to match up against that guy, at least in theory. But if you are able to put a guy all over the place and he's able to maximize reps from different spots, it's really hard to game plan against that type of player. And this is a kid where you have to have a specialized plan for how you are going to stop Carnell Tate. And as far as the rankings go, I'm right on par with 3 out of the 4. I think he's a top 20, top 25 player in this class. Like he's that type of dude. 5-star, absolutely.
Yeah.
And
25 is the floor. I think top 10, depending on certain things. I think that's the range for him in this class. And I think you make a great point when you talk about, and we'll show it on the film because IMG moved him around a little bit. Yeah, I think when you look at a guy like Carnell, I think the interesting thing is that's got to be Notre Dame's pitch to him, right? Like, listen, you're not going to be a W, you're not going to be an X, you're not going to be a Z, you're going to be all those things, and we're going to put pieces around you at tight end and receiver and running back that allow us to sort of move you all over the place. And when you look at the other guys they're recruiting, the guys they're going to push at. You talk about Rodney Gallagher, Braylon James, two completely different body types from each other and 2 completely different body types from Braylon James. That's going to be their pitch. It's like, look, man, we're going to have such a different skill set that it's going to be hard to take you out of the game if you come to play for us. And we can do the things for you that people say Ohio State can do, which is surround you with other great players. I mean, Tobias Merriweather is a great compliment to you because Tobias is a lot like Carnell too, in that Tobias can play all over. And I think Carnell's a better slot option than Tobias, where Tobias can play W and X. Carnell can do those things as well, but he can also play some Z. And I think that's another ideal part of the compliment to him. And so I think that's got to be Notre Dame's pitch is teams are going to have a specialized game plan for you, but we're not going to let them do that. And here's how we're going to utilize you. And so I think that is something certainly Notre Dame can sell or should be selling to Carnell Tate is, look, trust me, man, we're gonna have some fun with you. Now, we haven't been able to do that in the past because of A, B, C, and D, but that's why we recruited Tobias Merriweather. That's why we recruited Lorenzo Styles, and that's why we're recruiting you, because we're going to put you all over the place and let you make plays. We're going to get you in the best matchups possible. And he's a matchup nightmare. I mean, that's the thing about him, right? He's a matchup nightmare for people.
Yeah, I mean, there's at some points you just have to make decisions, right? Like he's a guy that you have to game plan for. Like I kind of said before, I think he can end up being the player if he hits a ceiling where you're going to have to roll a safety over top off of him if he's in the boundary, for instance, or if he's to the field and like you have to bracket him in some way and you have to eliminate space. You have to play him inside out. I mean, there's going to be ways that you have to counteract this type of player, which if he's the player that he can be, in my opinion, Notre Dame is able to land him. I mean, that offers, I mean, one-on-one opportunities for
Right.
guys, right? Like, I mean, if Lorenzo Styles is
Right.
still on the team and Carnell hits the ceiling, like we're talking about
Well, they're
one-on-one matchups, and
yeah, they're
it's
going to have
crazy.
to be on the team for at least a year together. With those two, him
Absolutely.
and Dion Colsey are going to have to be on the team at least 1 year together. He and Tobias are going to have to be on the team at least for 2 years together. Same with Eli Raridan and Holden Stace, and that again, that's the selling point. Like, look, man, you're not going to be alone here. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? We've got some dudes around you, and so let's dive into the film, Ryan. We're
Yep.
going to have a couple different videos we're going to show here. His highlight that we've looked at, he's got a highlight too, but there's a couple games I wanted to get to first. The first one, this is against American Heritage. With anybody that knows anything about American Heritage knows that this is a big time program. This is a program that's going to put multiple kids into the NFL on an annual basis. And you see Carnell here returning kickoffs for IMG. Very long strider when he gets in the open field. The thing you're going to see is toughness and balance. You're going to see a lot of that in these two games, in these highlights. He's a very strong football player, which is kind of funny as you see him in the boundary here, Ryan. I remember him being a real tall, skinny freshman at Marist, and now he's become just a really physical football player. Like, there's things about his game that remind me of Javon McKinley, and you can kind of see it there. There's things about his game that remind me of a big guy like that. There's things that remind me of smaller guys that can kind of move around. He does a lot of different things. See him get on top and stack. I love that, the ability to stack. You see him using his hands to fight, and then the ability to focus on the football with that guy draped all over him. This is something. He's got special ball skills, because I don't think Carnell's an elite athlete. He's a
Mhm.
good athlete. But you're
Yeah.
going to see in these videos, he's not a burner in the traditional sense. He's plenty fast enough. He's
Mhm.
not like a super sudden athlete, but he's a good athlete with elite receiver talent. And I think that's the thing I like about him, is you kind of see him lean in and stack, gives himself room to the sideline, and just makes a tremendous throw.
Well, and I think it says a lot about it, that the fact that he's at IMG Academy, which obviously everybody knows the talent that IMG puts into college football every year, and he's returning kicks, right? Like, I think that's
Mhm.
pretty indicative of what type of athlete he is. And I think my favorite thing about him, Brian, is like he's a big wide
Mhm.
receiver. Like you kind of mentioned, he's got similar frame to a Kevin Austin, but kid is very flexible in and out of breaks,
Mhm.
man. Like he's just not your traditional
Yeah.
boundary wide receiver who's going to play on a vertical third. Like this
Right.
kid can run routes. Like he can run
Right.
routes.
And you kind of see that here. The guy's playing him outside. He's playing press at the line. Then he drops outside. You see Cardinal kind of widen him out a little bit. I think the top end could be a little sharper here. He does it at other times. But I like that you can see the acceleration out of the break too. He gets that initial separation with that cut, and he's a very clean pass catcher. Very clean pass catcher. Here's another long kick return that he has.
Mhm.
He's got a very unique athleticism. You see that burst there? Like, again, like he's not Braden Lindsay. He's not Will Fuller, but he's, for his size, plenty fast. He's also not Javon McKinley from a speed standpoint. He's got more speed than Javon had, even more than Javon had coming out of high school. Did you see that right there? I mean, again, this is against one of the best high schools in the country, American Heritage.
And
This is a school. Go ahead, Ryan.
and I was just gonna say, with a longer frame too, like sometimes those guys are kind of build up speed type of players.
Mm-hmm.
What I really like about Carnell is he gets to his top speed very quickly. Like
Yes.
this isn't a guy that
This
takes a bunch
This
of steps to
return
get
right
there.
here, Ryan, this is a perfect example. He catches the ball 5-yard line. He's by the 12, he's full speed. I mean, and that's after catching the ball. Like, right now, he's already at full speed. I mean, that's impressive. You know what I mean? Like, you see that burst from him,
Mhm.
and it's fun to watch. We're gonna have him now. We're gonna pop in the film of him against Miami Northwestern. And again, y'all know Miami Northwestern, right? Like, this is athletes. These aren't just, oh, it's a decent high school, or these are athletes. I mean, these are kids that can
Yep.
flat out play. So this is going to be the film against Miami Northwestern. Let's check this out. I want to see him level off a little bit there. There's a couple things I think he can do to improve. I talked about the top ends. I want to see him level this one out a little bit. But you can see
Mhm.
he understands, he's a patient route runner when he needs to be. If he catches, there's a lot of catches where he's being hit, or there's somebody in his face at the point of contact. Here we go. This is a nice, gets back on top. This is great. I mean, great body control. It's really impressive body control there. And not a great route. I mean,
No.
it's not a bad route. It's just the guy's lost. Guy doesn't know what's going on. And he takes advantage of it. But this body control to be able to stop like that and go back and catch the ball, that's an impressive play. It's an impressive play.
And he's really able to get on top of guys really easily, right? Like he's able to stack guys. So that's kind of what stacking means. You kind of get in front of them and you kind of shield them off so you're able to win vertically. But that really helps him because you're going to hear people talk about blind spots a lot. When you're able to stack a corner like that, then the corner kind of gets into this to this panic mode where their back is to the quarterback and they just don't exactly understand where what's happening. Like they're kind of playing almost like a guessing game. And I think that's what makes him a good route runner is the fact that he takes advantage of those blind spots because he's able to stack and then work, inside or out. And he gets great position early in routes.
And here's a clip of him in the slot. You can see his ability to run. You talk about this. He pulls away from this cornerback. Again, finds that open zone. He's got a little bit too much of a dip at the line. You see this right here. You can really see it here. Way too much wasted motion out of his stance. A lot of receivers do that nowadays. Drives me nuts. I wouldn't mind seeing him clean that up a little bit, especially when working the slot. But you can see the speed. He just really outruns this kid, catches the ball clean. He's got really fast hands too. That's the thing I like about it. He snatches the ball out of the air in a hurry. Love this. He lays out for it. Just getting a lot of separation in this game against a high school that's known for having a lot of really athletic players on it. And then now let's he does not have a huddle highlight film. He just has game film, but there was some huddle or a highlight film on Max Preps that they have. So let's just look at this. So we'll just kind of let this roll through and we'll just kind of talk about some clips. You just saw this one right here that we just pointed out. Nice dive, lays out for it, but you like his speed. This is against the fake high school. So a nice little catch there. This is a sick catch. This is a sick catch. Well, this is against Bishop Sycamore.
That's just Sycamore, yeah.
I think that dude covered him is probably like 27. But this is, this concentration here is just outstanding. Because this ball has some zip on it. Like this is not a floater that he catches one-handed. Look at this. Look at the trajectory of this throw. This is a rope. An absolute rope that he just snatches out of the air. I mean, that's an impressive thing. We saw that play earlier. Here's another play where you see his strength. He's like, nope, I'm scoring. Sorry, y'all.
That was him in the slot too. You saw him kind of understand how to sit down against zone there. There it is.
Yeah, because if he keeps working out, that he's running right into that corner.
Exactly.
Just good feel for the game. Right, and then you see the toughness. We saw this earlier. We stacks. Saw this play a little bit earlier too. You get a couple more of these plays where you see him really showing off his skill. He's down in the boundary here. I like this because he knows he's running a quick route. Look how he uses his hands. I don't want to see him letting that guy get into his chest. I think when this guy walks up on you, you teach your receivers, you get yourself in fighting position, right? He does not do that. He does not get his hands up in fighting position. But you can see how strong he is. So as soon as that guy gets his hands on his chest, it's like, nope, don't do that again. And he just shakes him off, gets vertical. And this is he's selling a go. He's his first few steps, he's selling go. Like, hey, I'm going vertical. He stops. I like that suddenness. Good to be able to kind of sit down, sinks his hips. You don't see him leaning back. He does a good job on his top ends when he does stop routes of sinking his hips, because your hips are your brakes. A lot of people think it's your feet. It's not. It's your hips. Your hips are your brakes when you're making sudden movements. And that's him dominating as a blocker. Get to a couple more of these.
Make sure to remind me. I think I have a good comp for him, by the way.
Okay. There's one in there. Somebody asked about that too. What a comparison. I like this. Like, this is the modern game, right? Like, come off the lines, get that guy thinking and then beat him inside. Nice catch. Nice catch in traffic. We saw all those. Here we go. I think this is a game in Ohio. I think is this LaSalle? Who's this against? I don't remember who this was against. Here he's playing the boundary. So that guy's kind of playing inside of him, so he's got to try to lean him out a little bit. I like that. Again, I think he could be a little sharper on his top ends. Again, that's something I'd like to see from Carnell. Just be a little bit, stick that. I wouldn't mind seeing him eating up that cushion just a little bit more, but he can't push it really that much more, because if you push it too much more, then you're running right into that safety in the end zone, and you want to be
Right.
underneath that safety. So I don't really have a problem with the depth, maybe another step or two, but you see the ability to make catches in traffic. But you see a kid that understands how to win, right? Like, just manipulate his leverage and get inside. Again, is one thing that I think he can improve upon is just the ability to do a better job with his top end. Should be a little bit sharper, give himself a little bit more, just that initial separation, because I think he has enough speed that if he can get a nice step or two of separation, you're not going to be able to catch him. You're not going to be able to get back over there and catch him. So, one of the questions that we had in the chat was from Truman DeMel is, how good is Carnell Tate, and how can Coach Stuckey make him better? I think with a guy like Carnell Tate, the biggest thing is, Truman, is it's just about refining your game. I mean, obviously, Matt Bayless is going to have an impact. He's going to get bigger, stronger, and faster. It's just about refining his game. There's things he can do out of a stance to where, it's because the expression I've used is, that I would show my receivers is like, look, take two guys, right, in a sprint, and the first guy dips and then goes, and the next guy is already dipped and goes. I'm already 2 steps ahead of you at the snap, after a second. You've got to gather yourself and redistribute your weight, where I've already done that pre-snap and now I'm gone. Using his hands a little bit better, I think, at the snap is always something just about any receiver can do. Being a little sharper with his top ends, not drifting on some of his routes. Those are all things that a young receiver can get good at, but it's just about refining his skill set. But Ryan, for me, part of what makes him a big time prospect is he has a high ceiling, but the difference between him and some other players we're going to talk about on this board, he has an incredibly high floor. That's the other part of it that makes him such a unique prospect, is it's the combination of high. I think that's what a 5-star has to be. A 5-star has to, like, a 5-star now has to be a guy with a high floor and a high ceiling. And I think that's what kind of makes Carnell unique, is he's got a little bit of both of those.
Yeah, I think that when we're talking about just like the baseline traits, like he has the size and the length, and then he has a good athleticism all around. Like, I would just call him very smooth in everything that he does. But I think where the high floor comes, Brian, is like we highlighted several times. He understands how to attack leverage as a route runner. He understands how to sit down in zone, so he has good spatial awareness. And one thing that we didn't mention too much, Kid is a very natural hands catcher. Like, you don't see him fight the football. You don't see the ball get into his frame a ton. Like, he is fully extend and plucks away from his frame.
And Ryan, you can go back to his freshman year at Chicago Marist and see that. I mean, he was the same. He was on varsity as a true freshman at Marist, and it was the same thing. He was a hands catcher. And I mean, Carnell's been this guy since he was a freshman. I mean, just a real natural feel for the game, understands football, high football IQ. And as he's gotten stronger and bigger, he's just become more dominant. And he's the kind of guy that you can stick in the boundary and say, you're going to be a volume guy, and we're going to back shoulder you. We're going to work you on crosses. We're going to work you over the middle of the field. You're going to be our Miles Boykin. He can do those things, right? He can do all those things. He can also be a guy that you're going to put as the X and say, hey, we're going to stretch the field with you. We're going to get you screens. We're going to hit you. We're going to try to get you the ball in space, work the middle of the field from distance. I mean, he can do that. And then as a slot, he can use his size. And as you mentioned, his spatial awareness, his understanding of, hey, I can't keep going across on this route, or I'm going to run into that part of the coverage. I also can't settle too quickly because I know what's coming behind me. And really that understand the game. And he's strong, so he can catch the ball in space. And the length is important too, because a guy that has the length that you refer to, or that you mentioned, while also being a guy with fast hands and a natural pass catcher, if you want to know what to look for receivers that attack the football with their hands. A lot of guys either body catch, which is really not what you want, or guys will put their hands out, but they let their hands, they wait on the football. So even though they're not body catchers, their hands are out and they kind of absorb the football with their hands. That's fine. I mean, that's a decent pass catcher. But the elite pass catchers, in my opinion, are the guys that go after the football, Ryan. Like, they attack the football with their hands. They go get it and then bring it in. And Carnell does that. I mean, you see that on the film. He goes and gets the football. And that's important, because guys like that also tend to, with those fast hands, it's harder to play the ball on the deep throws. And you saw that on the one-handed catch. You saw that on the back shoulder in the end zone, which is, as a DB, if you've got me stacked or you've got a step on me, I'm taught that I'm playing your hands. When my hands go, your hands go. Or when your hands go, my hands go, if you're looking at it from the DB perspective. But guys that don't have great, like, fast hands, that don't attack the ball, they tend to start getting their hands out as the ball's coming, and then they try to run a few steps with their hands out, and then now I know my hands are coming out and I'm swiping at the football, right? And try running a 40-yard dash with your hands out like this and see how fast you are. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I want a guy that's running, snatch. That's what you see. Because now it's like you can't play. It's going to be a lot harder for you to play my hands when I'm just running, snatch. And that's what you see from Carnell. That's what you see from Carnell.
And a lot of people show their hand too early, even not even like as far like as early in the rep. Like they'll just start extending early, and then the defensive back's like, I know exactly where the ball is now because you just showed me where it is, right? Like that's where those late hands come in. I always think of Torrey Holt when I think of great hands, because like for me, he was one of the best I ever saw. Because like you said, he got full extension, and when the ball hit his hands, nothing moved, there was no jolt back, and he would always just pluck it. And I remember just watching him, and he would do like those catching competitions, and like you didn't hear anything, his hands were just so soft. It was just boom, nothing, done. And it was a lot of fun to watch. And I think the Carnell has that in him. And kind of my comp is reminiscent of that a little bit. Is I think of Allen Robinson, that has been a very, very good wide receiver for the Bears. Started off at the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I think he kind of gets a little bit of a misnomer, Brian, because he can do all the things: catch point, stack, vertical dude, but he is incredibly physical getting off press, and he has a really nice spatial awareness to him, and he can do a little more things as a route runner that I think people give him credit for. And he is a guy that can win down the football field because he understands how to attack leverage. So that's just a guy that stylistically I think is a little similar to Carnell.
Well, and he was from Michigan, so he's a northern kid. He was listed at like 6'3", 210 in college. Very similar body type to Carnell Tate. Junior year at Penn State had 97 catches for 1,432 yards. I mean, 70 as a sophomore, 77 catches for 1,018 yards. I mean, that's the kind of player that Carnell Tate can be. From a production standpoint. I mean, you're recruiting him to be that kind of volume player. And that's what makes him very unique. Is he can do the things that Michael Floyd could do. He could do the things that Miles Boykin can do. He can do the things that Chase Claypool can do. And I think that he's not quite as tall as any of those guys, closer to size to Michael Floyd than he was Miles or Chase, but a really unique special player. And so a guy that obviously Ohio State's done a great job there. But he's a guy that Notre Dame has to be able to go out and say, hey, look, this is the kind of guy you have to win. You know what he is for me, Ryan? He's a little bit of a litmus test for this new staff, right? Okay. Can you go out and get this kind of kid? Like Braylon James is a guy that he's talked about wanting to go away from home. He had that in the article with the interview with Brian Smith that we put up the other day. He's a guy that is a 5.0 GPA on a 5.0 scale who's looking at Stanford and Notre Dame. Like that's your typical, like, of course, Notre Dame's going to have success with those kind of kids. Carnell's the kind of kid that this is a national recruit. This is a kid that for whatever reason, and we don't need to get into the reasons why, you fell behind the 8 ball on this. Can this new staff come from behind and get this kind of kid? And I think that's what's going to really show. Can Marcus Freeman be that kind of elite recruiter? Can Tommy Reese be that kind of guy? Chad Bowden and Chancey Stuckey. And if you can win this battle with everything that has kind of been stacked against you in recent months, that's the thing that says, hey, this program is serious. Like they are serious because 5-star recruit, local kid, elite player, can play right away, high floor, high ceiling, just a really difference maker type of guy. Right. And again, if he's anything like Allen Robinson was in college, sign me up. And of course, Notre Dame fans got to find their Notre Dame references. People said that it reminds them a lot of Derek Mays as a pass catcher. And I think that's fair. I think it's very fair. And that's one of the things I always look at when I watch the gauntlet drill. I want to see guys that kind of get their hands out, but I'm listening. I don't really care. I don't really care about watching the gauntlet drill. Sometimes I'll just kind of look down and listen. Yeah. And like, seriously. And like, okay, yeah, that guy has hard hands. Like that's not necessarily something I love. Then you hear those guys, you're like, it's like, psh, 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 like you're not really hearing it. Like, okay, that's a guy with soft hands, real soft hands. And it's also like, guys with hard hands, like they're really tense And guys like Torrey Holt, guys like Carnell, that it's just really loose. It's like, hey, I'm going out. It's loose fingers, right? Those guys never get their fingers jammed when they're catching the ball, right? Like the guys are real tense hands, they get their fingers jammed all the time. And that's what you see from Carnell.
Yeah.
Now there's another receiver. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say that I want to add upon the fact that it's a big year for the staff, and I'd like the litmus test. I kind of idea behind it. It's also going to alleviate a lot of skepticism over Chancey Stuckey, because that was one of the hires. Everybody was super excited about every hire, and I mean, a lot of people were still excited about Chancey Stuckey with the reputation he's developed
because his name wasn't Bell Alexander. That
right.
There's always been natural excitement because of that.
Absolutely. And he's got a name to him, right? And he spent some time in the NFL. Obviously, he was, did a good job in his 1 year at Baylor, but it is literally learning on the job type of thing from a recruiting standpoint and from a, just maturation as a coaching standpoint. So if he is able to go out and sign a Carnell Tate, a Rodney Gallagher, a Braylon James, like that caliber of class, that's going to answer a lot of question marks that people have very early. So we are going to know, I think, pretty quickly here what type of recruiter Chancey Stuckey is. And then obviously in the 2022 season, we're going to see very quickly just how good of a coach he is, because there's a lot of things to improve on in that wide receiver room. So you should see a lot of stuff that's cleaned up very early on. Like there's going to be opportunity.
I think Notre Dame can have a really good receiver class without Carnell Tate. They can have a top 10 national receiver class without Carnell Tate. And I think they're going to have a top 10 receiver class. Landing Carnell Tate's the difference between having a top 10 receiver class and a top 3 receiver class, or potentially a number 1 receiver class. And, getting a couple of these other guys on the board, but you have to get an elite player to do that. A guy, and not a guy, like there's several guys on this board that have 5-star upside, including the next guy we're going to talk about. But Carnell is a 5-star now and in the future.